Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for the one, the only. He is the current, he is the future, he is the past, he is the present, he is all of cinema himself. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Brandon Cronenberg.
That's a very unfair introduction. I have no idea what to do.
Don't worry. So Brandon dressed me, and I dressed Brandon. So we're ready for this. This is awesome.
Yeah, we said we would swap wardrobe, and how embarrassing.
We're done. Thank you for being here. You're on a little bit of a trip. You did San Francisco last night, you got here tonight, and then New York 2 nights from now. What's it like having your films finally play in theaters uncut in the form that you wanted?
It's great. I mean, it's a little sad that people like the uncut version better. It's a little, like, I mean, I do too, but it's, I guess works better kind of uncut. Different with Possessor because it sort of didn't get really a release in the normal sense, because it was during the pandemic. It was like, kind of playing a video game or releasing a movie, because it was all done remotely, it was all through computers, and I didn't get to really talk to audiences or anything. But yeah, to have a night with the two of them is great, it's hugely exciting. And I'm a hermit, I don't like people, but I feel, I'm moved to, you're obviously I like you guys, but I'm moved to enjoy this somehow.
Yeah, this is definitely your people. This is the house for you. You said, I was going back through some earlier interviews, and you said that when you see a film, you want to be challenged. Does that inform your writing and your filmmaking? Is that a point where you come from initially? Because, we just saw it in this, we'll see it again in Possessor, but some of the iconography in there and some of the scenes and the violence is incredibly intense, deeply unnerving, and really unsettling. So, as I say, getting back to that point, you want to be challenged. Is that something that you're then conveying through your filmmaking and that you want to put upon your audiences?
I mean, I'm not. Usually, when I'm sitting down to write something, I'm not thinking, this will upset people. Like, I'm not really trying to do that specifically. To me, that stuff feels justified. I guess as I do it more and more, that seems like a weird explanation. Maybe I'm just like I'm a sadist with my characters or something. But usually, the narrative has to do with the character's evolution, psychologically, given what they're experiencing and what they're going through. So to me, to really tell that story, because it's so much about the interiority of the characters, you want the audience to experience viscerally what they're going through. Film's a very visual medium, and it isn't the same to just know theoretically that someone has experienced this violence or has gone through this thing, as it is to experience that viscerally and get calibrated through those experiences. So. I'm not deliberately trying to do that, but I don't know, I think you try to make movies that you hope will have some value to people, and the best you can do is think about what you might appreciate as a film and then try to do something that you might like.
And is it fair to say, as a result of the environment that you grew up in, some part, right? You were on your father's sets, and so seeing that type of filmmaking, did it naturally inform your own, would you say? And just your general kind of sensibilities. We've talked a lot, and I think it's fair to say that some of the things that, I think we just have like a hardened sensibility to things that kind of general audiences, and certainly something like the MPA, like just revolt away from.
I mean, I didn't really grow up watching my father's films, though. I know I was sort of around that stuff, but I wasn't really exposed to it any more than a kid normally would be exposed to that kind of thing. I watched Fast Company a lot on beta, but like in retrospect, it was probably a TV edit because I watched it as an adult. I was like, there are a lot more boobs in this. And I feel like I would have remembered all these boobs. But so I didn't really, I think you absorb things from your environment maybe in a roundabout way. You know, it shapes your upbringing, shapes your interests, I think. But I wasn't really being exposed to that kind of film making any more than other people.
Yeah, and thinking specifically about kind of the violence you've got in your films, and we'll start to transition into the films themselves, but kind of holistically, the violence in the films, incredibly tough, like brutally shot, like there's nothing that's left to the imagination. As you're writing, because you're, you know, this is Possessor and Antarctica, so you're writing your films. Are you seeing the violence depicted in your writing as you're doing it? Is it something that comes to life when you're there and you're shooting? Kareem, your cinematographer on these last two films, you guys work really intimately. How does that come to life?
So it's a bit of both. I mean, you know, okay, I'm writing, I know it's going to be a very long-winded stabbing scene because that's, you know, it's just inevitable that it's going to end up that way. So writing, everybody knows it's going to be a lot of stabbing, yeah, I guess. But there's also there's a very collaborative element to it as well, with Kareem and also with Dan Martin, who did both these films, the effects designer Dan Martin, who you guys might also know as Ben Wheatley's main effects guy. I think you write knowing that to a certain extent you're going to find it with your people. It's the same with the hallucination scene. I mean, the hallucination scene is even more than the violence. It's a huge process of just, you know, Kareem and I will spend months and months just you know, projecting images through gels and glass and finding ways to deform images and just creating this kind of bank of ideas. And there are these it's all practical in-camera stuff, all of those hallucination sequences. There's no CGI at all. And so you find things with hands-on materials that then take you down a certain path. And it's the same with Dan. He'll be playing with stuff and he'll say, you know, I had this amazing rig that I really wanted to do for another film. I've been trying to do this for years, you know, can we do it? And, you know, and both of those guys are just kind of mad geniuses in their field. So, yeah, I think it's just to me, exciting balance between having it going in and then finding all this other stuff with people I work with.
And extending that out, what about the relationship with the actors? Because it definitely, seeing it on the page is very different from how it comes to life in the film. It's just from a sense of just being infinitely more graphic and more punishing, especially I think some of the stabbings in this, and then what you put Sean Bean through in Possessor. So what's the relationship like with the talent? Like, how are they working through this, and what's their response? And because it's really interestingly cast between Abbott and Andrea, and then Skarsgård and Gus. What were their visceral reactions?
I mean, they're all people who do this kind of stuff because they like these kinds of films. You know, like if you send a script like that to an actor and they aren't up for it actively, they won't talk to you. There's no interview with them where you may or may not get them on. It's like if you've spoken to them, it's because they're the kind of person who wants to do this kind of thing. So there isn't like, you know, people talk about, say, okay, how did you get them to do this? And so, you know, as you said, it's punishing and brutal. They want to do it. I know it seems weird, but that's the kind of people they are, and that's who they are as artists, you know, and that's the sort of stuff that's exciting to them. In terms of violence specifically, it's not. Yeah, I've had these kind of conversations with people. Violence, when you're doing it on set, is really different from. It's really not violent at all. You know, it's ridiculous on set. It's like playing Halloween. It's just like because like. You know, okay, Alex getting stabbed, it seems terrible, you know, but in reality it's like, okay, he's standing by the post, he's got this fake thing on, and it's like Dan is like just off camera with his pump, and he's like, the thing is starting to bleed ahead of time, and we're like, oh shit, somebody mop that up, so we start cleaning. And then like, so we're all like trying to get it ready, and then the kid goes up with a half knife and puts it in, and then it's like, okay, action, and then it's done. It's like 5 seconds of just like yelling and flailing around. So each of those pieces that goes into making a scene like that in practice is so ridiculous. I think the most annoying thing for the actors is 2 things. Fake blood gets uncomfortable after a while, and especially you'll see in Possessor, if you haven't seen it, it's just like, I think, gets into your clothes, and that's annoying. Like, we had 2 kids, they're kids in each of the films, both just love doing it. Like, we did all the right stuff. There were child psychologists. Like, we were being very careful. But when you actually have, they're just young kids playing Halloween, it's fun for them. The thing that was most annoying to them is like blood in their clothes, because it's like sticky and like.
Did the kids get to see the films afterwards?
I don't know. I certainly didn't recommend it. But and then the other thing is just it's like prosthetic work, and it's very technical work, because again, you're just getting those seconds of screaming and flailing around. For actors, that's kind of boring. Like, effects day for me is really fun, and for my team, Kareem and Rob Cotterill and Dan, we're all just laughing hysterically. For the actors, it's just not challenging, because they want a dramatic scene with a lot of dialogue. That's a really fun actor scene. This is just like a lot of setup and a lot of yelling.
Speaking of yelling, Mia, did you write this with her in mind, or you found her through the casting process? Because she takes this role of Gabby, she takes it on, and then she just takes it to a whole other level. Some of the delivery in there, I mean, I was joking when I did Jay-Z, but everything that she brings, it was awesome sitting in the back of the room here, because it's such a descent into just like the darkest depths of our own inner depravity, and then she's on the hood of the car and she pulls the thing right up, and everyone was laughing at the right points. So what was Mia like on set? Did she just turn it on? Did she, to what extent did you have to direct, or did she just say, no, this is a mill where I can take Abby?
Right. Okay, so first of all, this isn't answering one of your questions, but my editor on this, his name is James, so it was very funny. Going through all the takes about Mia, I had always wanted to work with, the first time I saw her was in Nymphomaniac, and I think her, I've just been following her career the whole time, and every film she's in, I think she just steals every scene. It's incredible. She's just one of those incredible actors. So I was thrilled that she wanted to do it, and she's very humble. So she was, happy to do it. So that's how that came. I don't write for individual actors because it's just too much heartbreak. The stars have to align on so many levels to get any actor in any role that you can't expect it. But I was over the moon to have her on the film, of course. Directing Mia, I like to give my actors a lot of freedom. I've cast them because I think they're incredible artists, and they're going to bring that artistry to the part inevitably. My characters kind of go to sleep on me after a while. You develop a film for years and years and years, and you're writing it, you're living with these characters, and by the time you shoot, you're really bored of them. They've kind of gone to sleep, and so in casting, I really want an exciting actor who's going to come in and surprise me, and just wake them up. I don't really do improv. The script is the script, but there's a lot of freedom available to the actors to kind of go off and explore and find the characters, and I want that. I want to be caught off guard by who those characters become over time. So yeah, with those scenes, it was mainly about creating an environment where Mia could feel free to just go as big as she wanted to and really have fun with it. And, you know, as a director, you're always editing in your head, you're always making sure that you get the right moments, you know, giving general direction, but also I wanted to give her a lot of freedom. For the couple, when she's doing the speech with the gun, she was like, Brandon, what if I was just like firing a gun off a few times to get myself pumped? Is that okay? And I was like, no. that would be cool, but we're not set up to have you just like shooting wildly into the air before shooting all the way down. So she's like, okay. And then she, so what she did was she ran around the bus and was like taunting Alex in the bus and going, James. Like slapping the way after that she runs to the car and so with Mia, there's kind of she takes some time, gets herself into it in this really amazing way. Sometimes for a few scenes we would just roll the camera and let her do like takes and just like get herself worked up. She goes into this incredible place and then immediately afterwards just turns it off and is like super polite and delightful. Like she doesn't bring any of it onto the set afterwards. She gets herself worked up and then it's just like, oh, thank you.
So you're saying she's a polite young English woman and not a deranged sociopath.
I don't know her in her life. I can't, you know, like, but on set she was just totally delightful and really easy to work with and great. It was just,
that's the quote. If anyone knows Mia, that's the quote. She was delightful to work with. She's not a deranged sociopath. And then Alex is almost an inversion of who he is and who we've seen, even going all the way back to True Blood. Like he's always been this super dominant alpha male, and this came out. This came out after Northman. I think that's right. Where he'd just been like just ripping people's throats out of his bed. So that's also perfect casting as well, because it's against character for who we've been previously.
Yeah, but he is a very funny and subversive guy, you know, and he likes to push himself to these extremes. He likes to do things that are unexpected. I mean, I think that's one of the, you know, you can tell this in his performances, and that's one of the reasons I love him so much as an actor. Is he has the presence and the ability to do the sort of Hollywood leading man thing, and he has done that stuff, and he can't. You know, he's got the look and the charisma, and that's its own talent. You know, not to diminish that.
Yeah.
But he's way more interesting than that. And he really wants to push himself to these extremes and do unexpected stuff, and he has the ability to do both things. And so, especially for a film like this, it was perfect because he could begin the film looking like he stepped out of this tourist brochure, but then play completely against type and go to all these weird places and you know, wear a leash and you know. But that again, that's stuff that he likes, like he wants to. Well, again, I don't know him in his personal life. I will say that when we were doing Q&As together, he insisted on being walked. That was
On a leash.
I've walked him on a leash several times publicly, and that was his idea. So take what you want from that.
We're taking a lot.
Also a delightful guy to work with. No, but he was totally. And the thing is, you're doing indie filmmaking, you know, live resort, you know, on a budget with a crazy schedule. You need actors who are going to be game, and they were so like up for it and willing to put up with us basically. And like if it hadn't been if we had difficult, you know, diva actors, it would have been.
Because you shot this in Croatia.
And Hungary, half in Budapest,
and it was at a resort, but the resort wasn't closed, correct?
No, we thought it was going to be closed. So the resort, they brought us on. They agreed to do the film during like the peak of COVID, when they thought they were going to have nobody there. And they were like, oh, this is great, we'll at least have people there living, because we lived there for a few weeks when we were shooting. But Croatia, you know, it's Croatia, and it's the Dalmatian coast. They, you know, the the non-coastal Croatians will tell you they're a little easygoing on the coast. There's a bit of an intra-Croatian rivalry there. So it was just open for business the whole time we were there, and they didn't want us there because we were disrupted. And so stuff would happen like we'd be in a lobby shooting, and we would have booked the lobby, but it's a live lobby, and so their receptionist was like struggling with our actor receptionist for control over the computer. And like Alex is there trying to block the scene, and next to him there are like 8 elderly people who need toilet paper, and it's just like, and there's this angry jazz pianist who kept starting up in the middle of the shoot. He was meant to go on at 8 and it was 9, and like I was like, can you just tell the jazz pianist like we're shooting a movie, and they're like, okay, I guess if you want, like. So it was a wild time. Okay, one more story about the resort. So they had these teams come in from various companies. They would come in, like T-Mobile was there. They do all these like team building things.
Yeah.
And so 1 week it was the FBI. But my first AD and I were like floating in the sea. And this boat full of FBI agents just like pulled up, and they got off, and they were there for a week doing FBI team building, and like they were running marathons and filming themselves with drones. I have this picture. It's our set, and it says "Do not sit here" in big letters, and like 80 FBI agents are sitting on the set, and they broke it. There were these drunken FBI ladies. This was my favorite thing. Drunken FBI ladies came up to us in the middle of shooting a scene, and they said, "Where's your ID?" And they said, "Look, we heard Alexander Skarsgård is around. Is that true?" And they were talking to my camera operator, Johan, and he was like, "I don't know." And they were like, "You know, if this was the United States, it would be a federal offense to lie to." And he said, "Well, we're in Croatia." And they went, okay. And they just sort of stumbled off somewhere. And like, it was crazy.
Thirsty FBI agents. Super thirsty.
The FBI are parched.
These questions don't matter anymore. Yeah, gentlemen, right there, glasses.
Apart from the soundtrack that he made for your film, what's your favorite Tim Hacker project?
What's your favorite? I'll repeat the question for the audience. Apart from the soundtrack, what's your favorite Tim Hacker project? Here, you can have a.
I don't really have favorites, you know, like, I know Rain Death is like the, you know, maybe, I don't know, general go-to favorite for people who like to do. I don't know, I don't know how to do favorites, I'm terrible at it. He's just great. Yeah, that's a terrible answer.
There's a lot of strange details in the film, but one that stands out to me is in the building before the shuttle, the people with the giant square hats and long noses. Was there particular inspiration by that, or any meaning, or was it just another strange detail you want to add to the film?
Strange details in the film.
Strange details in the film.
Square hats, long noses.
Right, square hats, long noses. So what that is it is a reproduction of an anti-Semitic costume from the Belgian city of Aalst. So Aalst has this festival that they do yearly, and it was in the news when I was writing, because they have these, like, they say it's just a freedom of speech thing, but they obviously hate Jews, and it's like, there are these huge floats with like Jewish caricatures eating money, and like, those costumes in Aalst usually have like insect bodies as well, like they do this whole like Jew-hating thing. So there's a thread in the film. Basically, the Chinese restaurant in the film was a real experience I had at a resort like that, and I thought like, oh, that's pretty offensive, but I realized after I went to the MPA, we were sort of put on trial at the MPA, and someone took me to what is your restaurant where people just wear that here? It's like a PJ, whatever.
PF Chang's?
PF Chang's, yeah. Anyways, I guess everybody's done that. But for me, I'm from Canada, I was like, God, that's like pretty gross.
Wait, there's no PF Chang's in Canada?
But so I was like, okay, it's a surreal thing to be at this resort and seeing this kind of like cultural appropriation commodification, but also weirdly thematic because it's this like the essence of a certain kind of resort going and tourism is this kind of processing of the real world in this grotesque way and spitting it back out in this commercial sense. So there's a thread of that. There's a Chinese restaurant. There's a Bollywood dancing. And then so I wanted to also, connect with my roots and do alt commentary about creeping anti-Semitism in Europe.
That warrants this gentleman's hand. Right there, you mind skipping? Yeah.
Who?
So, I just want to say thank you for being here, because that's is one of my absolute favorite films. And I
Oh,
just
thank
want memories of actually seeing it when the onset showed it at the drive-in, which is Tiki doing the pandemic.
It's a true story. Hell, you can have a violin as well. Pass that one back.
I want to ask actually about the music too, because one of the, I'm a musician, and so one of the things that really does stick with me, thank you very much, is the music of the film. And Jim Williams, amazing in all of his stuff. I love Titan.
I know there's a question.
Yeah, so exactly. His flow and Pinhacko's, they're sonically so different. They're both based off of ambience. But Pinhacko goes into much more dark electronic, while Williams, Possessor is kind of how I would call demented jazz. So I'm wondering if you could talk about the process behind crafting those soundtracks.
Can you talk about the two songs?
Yeah. So part of it is they're both just composers I really love and respect, and I think so. There are kind of two aspects of it. It's what I want, and what I want is usually a mix of electronic and acoustic instrumentation that creates this kind of, as you said, there's sort of ambient elements, although not entirely, especially with Jim's score. As for those of you who haven't seen Possessor yet, there are themes and stuff. There are classical themes. But also there are two very different composers who have different strengths and different impulses. And, with a movie, I think, there's a sense that as a director, you're sort of, you're getting into everything and sort of imposing your will on all aspects of the thing and sort of controlling it up to a certain extent. But there's also a degree to which you're really collaborating with wonderful artists who bring their own artistry to it, and it's really their film as well. And so, a lot of your decision making as a director is finding artists who you respect and giving them some freedom to bring their work to it and to bring their own art to it. So, I'm sure like composers will tell you I'm nitpicky and super annoying to deal with. That's probably true of me generally, but also. They know different musicians, they have different instruments that they like, they break. So I'll say generally this is the kind of mood that I want, this is sort of what I feel like the score needs to do. They'll say, what about this stuff? And both of them were really great about doing sort of rough tracks before we had edited so that we could slot their cues in while we were cutting. And when you're doing that, when someone does that, it's fantastic because the film just rejects some of the music and it really absorbs some of the music and some stuff you're not expecting, like Jim's score. There's all this sort of like horn stuff that's like kind of a weird variant on sort of a classic noir score. I would never in a million years have said, Jim, do that, but he just played around with it and we started cutting to it and we're like, wow, it's really eating this up, so let's embrace that theme. And then, so there's a real back and forth with both of those composers who are very generous, but also are putting so much of themselves and their own art into it, and it's that process that led to those differences.
Is there a point in the filmmaking process where you know the composer that you wanted for each of these films?
Yes, but it's kind of late. Like it's sort of late. I feel like again, it's maybe just an indie film thing. There's never time to think. And so you're like, oh yeah, we'll get a composer, we'll figure out the composer thing, and then like you're usually shooting, and then you're listening to musicians expecting post to happen. And so it's kind of late in the game for me usually, but I've been really lucky with it. I mean, I love both of them as artists on their own.
Yeah, and they really amplify and understand, I think, what's happening, what you're making within the film. So yeah, okay, that's good. There's a waving hand all the way in the back corner. Yes.
Can you talk about the masks? They're so incredibly effective. Yeah, please.
The masks.
Sure, yeah, the masks. So the masks are designed by Richard Rapphorst, who some of you might know. He's a filmmaker and concept artist and comic book artist. He did Frankenstein's Army, if you know that movie. And we just, I mean, the masks were obviously going to be a central image in the film. We experimented with some just sort of general concept art stuff, but it became apparent really early on that we needed just one artist with a great vision who could really bring voice to the masks. And Kareem and I have been fans of Richard's for a long time. We met him at Fantasia years earlier, and so we got in touch with him. And yeah, I mean, he sent a rough document initially that was this sort of like image mashing stuff that he just threw together in textures. It was like, wow, like already so exciting, and we just went down the path of it. So it's Richard's design for that specific part.
Great.
I have them all, yeah. Although Elon has some.
They've gone back. Yeah, they're all the whatever the SFX team is. Yeah, they shipped. I think last week. Inside baseball. Sorry.
I have all of them.
Grab me afterwards. I've got your a record. There's a question over here. Yeah, right there.
Alright, so two things. First, thank you for Possessor, because I saw it when it first released at a drive-in, and I'm so excited to see it in the theater. So,
Oh, thank you.
amazing, I loved it.
Thanks for
I
being
wanna
with
say
us.
again.
Stick around.
Next thing was, I did notice in antiviral, and then these two, you do a really twisted, I love it by the way, so it's a compliment, a really twisted sci-fi theme in all three of your movies. What inspires that, dude? Because it's twisted and it's awesome.
So, lots of film, twisted sci-fi. I think there's also something in the, it feels, all of your films, they feel like they're kind of in the present, but it's also very much like it's a kind of weird near future as well. And the role of technology, plays within the film, in the films, in particular, the last two, as a means of separation from the body. That feels like that's your groove.
Thank you. I think it's okay. So it's just it's a useful genre for sort of exploring actual experiences and society, I guess. I mean, it's great for satire because you can take what's actually there, you put it through a lens so that it's just skewed slightly, and you're kind of exploring things in a kind of alien way, but that relate to real experiences and real technology and current cultural currents. And so I just feel when you displace people a little bit, it kind of counteracts that habituation, and you can talk about it in a fresh way, where people see it with fresh eyes, and it just plus it gives you freedom to play around a little bit. I think in terms of the near future or sort of alternate timeline stuff, it's mainly because the sci-fi that I'm doing tends to not be hard sci-fi. Like in particular, Infinity Pool, but Possessor as well. It doesn't make sense. Like Infinity Pool is not an accurate depiction of the future of cloning technology. You know, like, it's completely ridiculous. And it's like it's almost more like magic realism in a way, where it's like you take a world that's sort of familiar and you tweak it in this particular way, and that lets you talk about certain stuff because of all the consequences that flow from that change. Because that's a little different because it's more of a different world, but I think I don't know why, like, it's where my head's at, I guess, but I like using the sci-fi to talk about certain things rather than comment on where we're actually going. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
I think it's fair to say as well, because we're, in particular I think with Infinity Pool, because it's just a step away from where we are. it's far closer to being grounded in reality. We see ourselves in this, and then ultimately it becomes far more horrific. And even though you said the cloning is ridiculous, it also becomes more believable because it's real. General, right there.
Yeah, I'm just curious about like your conversation back and forth with the NPAA. Do they kind of tell you exactly what they got, or do you get to make some concessions, or what are those conversations like?
Those evil NPA folks. How's that process?
The MPA. So there, I can talk about this openly because there was a New York Times article.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, that's fine.
So the aptly named Ethan Noble is a consultant who sort of a lot of distributors in the U.S. because the MPA tends to be a problem if you're doing genre will work with people who know them and sort of act as intermediaries, and so they give you sort of vague, kind of horrible feedback, and then Ethan goes, what they mean is, like, here's how you enact that in a concrete way. Like, I think if you do this, 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 and this, that will sort of address what they're getting at. My favorite...
He's essentially an MPA whisperer. Like, takes what they say, distills it, and then converts it into something that's as palatable as possible.
Yeah, and translator, because you can't, like, sometimes it was like, I don't know, they had a real problem with Jaleel masturbating in the orgy, and you don't see he's not really obviously jerking off, and you don't see his penis, it's just sort of his butt briefly. And they were like, fixated, that was one thing that they were fixated on. And I was just like, I don't know, and it's like, yeah, he's doing something to someone's ass. And I'm like, okay, he's not doing anything then. I don't know what movie you're watching. And then they're like, but you know, I was like, you don't see anything. And they're like, yeah, but you know what he's doing. And I'm like, I don't know, so is the conceit here that if you trim the sex scenes and someone under 18 sees it, they just will be so confused that they won't know, like, they won't know what they're doing. Like, I don't know, they just have certain weird hang-ups. My favorite note from them on Possessor was like, the woman is on top for too long. You'll see that scene, but it's like, that's their vibe. So, literally the only objective thing is that you can't have hard cocks in your film. So that's every film fix. Well, not antiviral, but the hard cocks I know are going to get cut. But but other than that, it's a very subjective, weird conversation. And you know what? I talked to some of the NBA people during the sort of we lost an appeal. We went in, and it's this really perverse thing. There's a priest that has to be present. It's been this way since the 50s. You go in, your film is basically on trial, and they need a priest there to be a representative of the religious community. But I went into the back with some of the NBA people, and they were fine. They were like kind of nice. They were like, even though we lost, they were like, we think you should have won. They were like, the rating system's fucked right now. We really want to like actually change it, but it's like a whole thing with the studio. I don't know if they were just putting that on until but I don't know that they're all horrible. They're just collectively horrible.
And it could be, and you're right, it's subjective. A number of the people can be like, yeah, this is fine, but then there'll be that one fucking priest. and to convince that person to get it passed, and they can draw a red line in it, and then you're kind of stuck.
Yeah, well, we split the jury. There's a jury when you do an appeal, and you have to go to Sherman Oaks, so that's the problem. There's a jury, and we split the jury 4-4, and the MPA who were doing the prosecution were like, we think you won. We would accept this right now. Like, this was still a cut version, but they were like, we think you did a great job dealing with us. And like, you're good, but you have to win by 2/3. And so I don't know if the priest just talked someone.
But there is this process of going back and forth, and it's like you're literally peeling layers of an onion back to get it to that point, because obviously you want, from a distributor, you want to preserve the artistic vision of the filmmaker, and then the NPA, they've just got these weird lines, and it's wild if you think about it. And if you've seen the film Evil Dead Rise, it's so insanely over the top and it's so gratuitously violent. But this is so closely based in reality, and it's the violence that exists in there. It's like, wow, that's too real. And so there's certain parameters that they'll put around things.
Also, if they're already censoring sex, they go off more on the violence. Like if you're super combined.
Yeah, you put the two together, it's a double whammy.
Yeah,
For sure. And you love both. So, wow, there's a lot of hands. Lady right there, yeah, in the kind of spotted jacket thing.
I have a good follow-up question to that. I was wondering why it's called uncut when Skarsgård is clearly circumcised.
Why is this called Brandon Cronenberg Uncut?
You definitely get one.
I got one.
Oh, you got one? It's like I read in the class. There's someone like two hands up. He's so excited. Oh, so you have another question?
Yeah,
Does it beat the last one? I don't think so.
I just had to make that joke after what you were talking about. But I was just really curious about like the women in the movie and kind of the role that they play in kind of getting him to become his alter ego, I guess. And you know, like it's interesting how, you know, I mean, well, kind of spinning off the uncut thing. I mean, she obviously is trying to get him to go to places that, you know, that will challenge him or you know, make him go wild and all that. And then she later on says that you know, his wife is the kind of woman who's going to make him, you know, emasculated or whatever. And I just thought that was interesting that you're kind of using the women against, like, to make him feel like he needs to be more a man, aka violent. And so I just was curious, like, your thought process with that, and like what I just thought it was cool how you use that, and I just wanted to kind of have you talk.
The question is about the role of women, in particular Gabby and her relationship with James, and how she's able to turn him into emasculated.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the thing about James as a character, and this is, you know, I wrote this film. My first film and my second film were 8 years apart, and I just was failing every day to make a movie for like 8 years. It was really so. And when you're like trying to write something and you're failing all the time, James isn't a stand-in for me, but there's a degree to which he is a kind of self-mockery. You know, there's a thread in there that's about me making fun of myself and my own insecurities and vanity and whatever. So I think for the different women, it's like basically James, in my mind, is someone who should let go of this. Like, he's failed. He's never going to be a writer. He wrote this one book that should never have been published. He's not going to be. And he's getting older, and he should really just, like, I think anyone in his life, including Em, would see that it's just he's clinging to this sort of vain illusion of himself. And so I don't think Em, with all the, you know, emasculation of leading him to violence, that's Gabby playing to his image of himself in a way, if that makes sense. Like, I think Em's vision of him is as he actually is, which is like this guy who really should move on and is getting older. She sees him for who he really is. He doesn't like that because he's clinging to this image of himself, and then Gabby sort of comes in as presents a version of himself that he is clinging to, and so that's what opens him up to her sort of vacation, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's a good answer, but it's like her vacation is obviously in part to take someone through this, and you know, she's also, you know, a failed actor, and maybe that's part of her. I talked to Mia about that a lot. How it's like her vacation in some ways is also sort of performing and seducing and manipulating, and that she's putting on this performance which then is dropped at the end. And so to her, it's kind of something that she's getting in this context that she doesn't get in her real life, and in that way, to get there, she's playing to like his delusions about himself as well. I don't know. I don't know if that's a good answer.
But it's in James all along. I mean, that's the thing. He just needs to be popped up.
It's in it all along, but it's it's like this scene on the beach. This is sort of like what he wants to hear. Like, oh yeah, it's not that I'm like this pathetic failure. It's just women, like keeping me down, and so it's really about it's a kind of mockery of that kind of insecurity, but that's at the essence of who he is, and she can see that. If that makes sense.
I've been given the nod. The nod means one more question. Who's got the best question in the room? Who said clear to me? Young lady right there.
Okay, I wanted to ask, it seems to me there's like a thematic conversation between a lot of your films, I guess all of them, around like the connection between the physical body and sort of like the essence of someone. And I just wanted to know what draws you to that and how that sort of feels.
It's a great question to close on. Covering all three of your films, the relationship with the body, the connection between the two, also adding to that concept of identity that plays such an important part. But then the physical body, and then what the body becomes. You want to walk us through a little bit of that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, as far as to sort of unpack your own preoccupations, I think film and most narrative art in general is to a certain degree always going to be about exploring what it is to be a human being. Even in a sort of straight groundness, it's about our own experiences, it's about sort of what it is to be people, and I guess just because of the way my brain works, I go to well, wait, what is it to be people? In this sort of general sense. I think to me we aren't anything. There is no essence. I think it's all a kind of performance, and then this in Infinity Pool, I was playing more with there's this tradition of personal identity philosophy. It's just sort of what is it to be a thing throughout time and that is identical to itself over time, and the answer is kind of it isn't that isn't really a thing. It's something that we do together, and it has to do with our own perceptions of each other, the way our brains work. We invent each other in that way. In Possessor, it's a bit more about performing. Without, if you haven't seen it, it's a bit more about how we perform ourselves, and I think we perform ourselves for each other. We obviously don't have any access to each other's interiority, and so there's a degree to which we're kind of playing this role, and so much is veiled. But I don't think internally we know who we are either. I think we perform this version of ourselves for ourselves because, it's, in extreme cases, we all know those people who just have this very obvious lack of self-awareness, and who they are in reality is obviously so different from who they think they are, and we can kind of get a glimpse at that self-image, and we can see that there's a disconnect there. But to a certain degree, that's everybody, right? We don't know who we are in the world. We're just kind of guessing at it. We're lying to ourselves constantly, for sure. And so, both, and I think especially with these last two films, there are different ways of getting to some degree at the idea that we are collective fictions as people. We invent ourselves and other people invent us. It's this collective narrative writing, whether intentionally or not, that makes a person. And the body is sort of part of that. But it's the way our brains work, and it's the way we respond to other physical bodies rather than because of some essence or some soul. That's a very rambling answer, I don't know.
Brandon, so we're gonna watch. I'm gonna do a quick time check. So it's 9:56. We're gonna watch Possessor next. We'll do that. Ryan, 10:05. Is that cool? So we'll do a quick 10-minute changeover. Brandon, I can't thank you enough for being here. It's been a long time coming. It's a pleasure and an honor to screen your films, but in particular in their uncut form. So thank you for coming all the way from beautiful Toronto.